Good evening. This is Mrs. Schmidt from the reading room, and I'm here to read you the story that I've written called The Truth About Leprechauns. You can see it's by Desiree Schmidt, and the images that you'll see throughout this story are from Google Images. The Truth About Leprechauns. In a beautiful village in the mountains, you'll find nestled in a quiet valley, a quiet little village. The weather is always fair, with birds chirping and fragrant flowers in bloom. White, puffy clouds float along the powdery blue sky as the sun gently sends its rays to the earth below. On closer look, you see smiling faces all around. Neighbors help each other, and nobody is a stranger in this quaint little leprechaun village. Upon arriving at Keaton Acre, everyone offers their kind spirit to help settle anyone new into the community. Homemade gifts of all sorts are brought to welcome newcomers. When the Millers moved to Keaton, they especially enjoyed the lovely cloth napkins and the cookbook Miss Teaberry brought over. And still to this day, everyone talks about Mr. and Mrs. Everly's cupcakes and the treasured recipe to make them. It is believed that her cupcakes hold some sort of magic. Every new face was a new, helpful, and cheerful friend except for one young boy. Good morning, Evie, Terrence, Mr. Fulbright calls to the children, skipping along the path to ensure early arrival to school. Hi there, Finn, he kindly adds to the one kicking dirt with a scowl on his face. Finn replies under his breath. Chin up, Finn. It's going to be a great day, son, added Mr. Fulbright. Nobody quite understood why it was that Finn was so different than the other leprechauns in Keaton. His parents were fine folk, and all of the other Everly children were as pleasant as pineapple party punch. Finn Everly, though, he was an odd one. Finn had an older brother and sister who were as lovely as anyone could imagine. Brother Ryan was starting college to prepare for a career as a police officer, and his sister Susanna was almost finished with her first year of high school. They cared for Finn, who was in the 5th grade, and gave him all the attention he could stand, and even quiet time when he wanted it. Finn was big brother to sweet Catherine, who was just 4 years old. She loved her big brother Finn. Every time she tried to play with him, though, he just froze up and turned away from her. Catherine just couldn't understand what made her Finny so sour. After breakfast, Mrs. Everly set out a plate of bite-sized cupcakes, enough for everyone in the family to have one, or even two if they'd like a second one, or to share with a friend. Cupcakes were a Keaton tradition. Finn would have absolutely no part of it, though. He turned his nose right up and away from cupcakes every time he saw them. He stomped off in a huff, kicking dirt and usually arriving to school after the tardy bell had rung. One March morning, Finn was quite a ways behind the other children walking to school. Marianne offered to walk with Finn so he wouldn't be lonely. But not wanting to be late herself, she just had to leave Finn. Finn didn't mind at all. He thought to himself, this cheerful voice and blaring smile are enough to drive me batty. Alone at the brook, Finn decided he just didn't belong in Keaton. He didn't want to be in a place where nobody understood him. Finn saw a bridge a minute's walk down the lane and thought he could make it just fine on his own, living under the protection of the bridge. So he walked to the bridge and made friends with the troll. The two were perfect for each other, not wanting to be bothered and grumbling back and forth just worked just fine for them. They shared their mischievous ways with one another while they fished in the brook. Finn was glad to have found his place in the world with Travis. The day before the most important leprechaun celebration of the year, the two found a school down the hill in Holly Valley near a river. They snuck into the building looking for the teacher's candy jars. They turned over desks and supply caddies and even scribbled on the board with markers. They left messes of garbage and gold dust. The school was ravaged as though a pack of wild wolves was on the loose. After that trip down the hill, Finn decided he didn't need anyone from Keaton anymore. Finn found Travis, who appreciated Finn's misery. All the while, Keaton was worried sick about Finn after discovering he had not gone to school nor returned home that day. That was the first time in my life I've had fun, Finn said to Travis. Let's make it a tradition then, Finny old pal. Next time we'll find those teachers' candy jars. I'm going to mark it on the calendar. And when they arrived back at the bridge, Travis did just as he said. He got out a calendar and marked March 16th with an evil smiley face for as many years as he could mark before his marker went dry. Years went by, and despite the Everleys and all of Keaton's efforts, Finn just could not be found. Little did they know, he was more than content living down the brook with Travis. The two pals spent most of their days and nights sleeping and occasionally catching fish or gathering berries to eat. On rare occasion, Finn thought of his family, but only to snap himself away from those thoughts. It was time to flip the calendar again, and it would be the third year of their annual Trash the Holly Valley school tradition. March 16th was the most exciting day of the year for both Finn and Travis. Finn went to wake Travis, but found his spot was empty. Finn looked around and he spotted a teeny tiny Travis walking far up the hill. Trav, where are you going? Finn shouted. Travis replied with a simple, no looking back wave. Finn knew Travis had a plan. Travis always had a plan. He was probably gathering some supplies for their night of chaos and destruction. Hopefully, something that would help them find the teacher's candy jars tonight. Hours went by, and the sun began to set behind the hills. It was odd for Travis to be gone for so long, but Finn figured after catching another short nap, Travis would surely be back and ready with the best plan ever for the evening. Well into the dark hours of the evening, Finn woke up. Travis never did return. Finn did continue on to the school that evening, alone. He was ready to give the students something to see on St. Patrick's Day. Rather than just having fun, though, he was angry and destroyed things even worse than in years before. He noticed some of the kids had tried to trick the trickster by setting traps, but Finn was too crafty to fall for any of those tricks. "Trick is on you, kids!" he shouted. "This is worse than before," Lee declared, picking up his pencil box. "Let's catch the criminals who are doing this to us," Julie said. Mr. O'Reilly, the teacher for grades 2 and 3, gathered his students and calmly said, "I have an idea." A plan was in motion. In the months to come, Mr. O'Reilly even got Mrs. Sullivan from grade 1 and Principal Harris to join in the plan. For the whole month of March, the children worked at home on their leprechaun traps and brought them to school St. Patrick's Week. All of the candy-lured traps were set at the end of the day, and their plan was just beginning. All of the Holly Valley students went home that afternoon, did their homework, and played outside. Their parents called them into the house at dark for dinner. After dinner, the students' teachers encouraged them to take a nap because it would be a long night. Of course, none of the students could imagine sleep on the most exciting night of the year, the night they would catch a leprechaun. On arriving at the school, at what was typically the children's bedtime, Principal Harris, Mr. O'Reilly, and Mrs. Sullivan greeted the students and shared the watch schedule. Mr. O'Reilly and his class would be on watch from 8 p.m. until midnight. Julie and Hannah had never been so ready in all their lives. They wanted to see this rat faced criminal face to face and let him have it for ruining all their things. The students were assigned their posts and went with adults to lie in wait for what was to come. Meanwhile, an angry Finn, now age 14, and thinking he's as clever as ever, raced toward Holly Valley in search of a night of thrills and was determined to get the teacher's candy jars. He would get enough candy to last him another year tonight. "Let's get this party started," he said to himself. It was nearing midnight, and the night custodians were sure to be finished and long gone. Lee was having a hard time staying awake. His bedtime was almost 4 hours ago. Jared kept on elbowing him, saying, "Come on, Lee, we're going to get him. Don't quit on me." What was that? Lee whispered. "Shh," his dad said, looking quickly. "I heard it too." The little sound stopped. The boys breathed. Then it started again. They froze. Then the sound stopped. They gasped for air. Then, like a bull in a china shop, there was an incredible ruckus, crashing and thrashing and screaming. "Ah!" "We got him," Julie shouted to Mr. O'Reilly. Principal Harris safely kept the children safely at a distance while the brave Mr. O'Reilly approached room 202 cautiously. There was Finn, stuck in a trap. The students, their teachers, volunteers, and principal questioned the intruder. They wanted to know who this little guy in green was, and more importantly, why he would do such a thing to others' property. As the questions and answers came, Finn shared about how he had run away from Keaton Acre because he didn't fit in with all the other leprechauns. "There are more of you?" exclaimed Principal Harris. "Take us to see the others." Finn, knowing the only way to free himself was to cooperate, took the kids and adults far up the hill to his village. It was quite the hike, and everyone was beyond tired. But finally, they arrived at Keaton, a village they had always thought to be just a fairy tale. They hid behind a factory and spied hundreds of leprechauns. So nice, friendly, happy, kind. They were surprised that such a mischievous leprechaun as Finn could be from this lovely place, but could understand why felt he didn't fit in. Finn was nervous. He felt shame in having left his family and wondered if baby Catherine even knew who he was anymore. He did not want to be spied. All of the Holly Valley visitors hid quietly and happily observed the tranquil life the leprechauns led. Mrs. Sullivan couldn't resist and leaned over to smell the beautiful blooming flowers. Despite the pleasant scent, she must have gotten a bit of the pollen and couldn't hold back an enormous, very unladylike sneeze. Achoo! The hiding was over, and the leprechauns of Keaton ran toward the sound. Finn ran too. He ran away and hid across the lane. He watched all of his schoolmates from Keaton happily meeting new friends from Holly Valley. It was the day of celebrating, anyway, celebrating St. Patrick's work in Old Ireland. But now they got to celebrate meeting new friends as well. All of the leprechauns brought out their green treats to share. Keaton's mayor, Ryan Everly, asked Principal Harris how the Holly Valley children heard of Keaton. "Finn brought us here, sir," said Principal Harris. "Finn?" screeched a little Everly. She went running off. "Do you remember Finn?" Mr. O'Reilly asked. "We sure do, sir. Finn's my kid brother," Mayor Everly said, head hanging low. "Haven't seen the lad in close to half a dozen years now." "He was just here moments ago," Hannah said. "He can't be far." Catherine quickly returned, dragging her mother and father by the hand. "They said Finn was here, Mummy." "Is that true, Ryan? Was Finn here?" Mrs. Everly asked her son. "It is true, Mummy, but he appears to be gone now." Mr. and Mrs. Everly hung their heads low and walked toward their home. In fact, everyone headed back to their business, and the celebrations of new friendship were all but forgotten. Suddenly, Mr. Everly felt a palm on his back. Without turning back, he said, "Ryan, we'll see you for supper tonight." "That would be really great, Dad," Finn replied. Mr. Everly stopped in his tracks. That wasn't Ryan. "Finn? Finn! It's you, son! It's you! Oh, my boy is home!" The gloom that had briefly settled on Keaton was lifted when they heard Mr. and Mrs. Everly shout with joy. A smile erupted onto Finn's face. Up until that point, Finn had always grumbled away from celebrations, and aside from storing up all the candies he'd stolen from leprechaun traps, he had never tried any sweet treats his friends in Keaton had made. Today was a new start, though, and there were so many treats all around. Finn spoke with his schoolmates and had many soft smiles and even some laughter. Mrs. Everly briefly left the celebration, but returned with a tray of her magical cupcakes. This time they encouraged Finn to try one. He felt a little tingle in his heart and throughout his whole body. He finally found that the secret of leprechaun happiness was in his mother's cupcakes. He found Catherine and shared a cupcake with her. Finn was proud to be an Everly from Keaton Acre until the old age of 103.